Hi everyone, welcome back. Well, I promised you that we would do a little bit more, give you a little bit more of an idea about color and design that some of the Dutch masters used, okay? There's so many of you that make these comments, oh, you're so lucky, you're so talented, you're really gifted. No. For me, it was a lot of study and a lot of work. I was a chemist. I followed formulas and ways to put things together. And so when I found the Dutch, way back almost 30 years ago, when I found the Dutch book, Paul Taylor, that my wife got for me, I was able to find this Grootschone book, or this passageway through secrets of how they put things together. And in that one video a couple of times ago, I introduced you a little bit about color, okay, how they would use color. And we did a real contemporary rose with color. Let's take a little bit more of a deep dive into design. Okay, now, we could study this like I have for over a year, and once you learn all of those concepts of design, you can design any kind of beautiful floral because all of the secrets are there. But let's just introduce you to some of the thoughts, okay? Let's do that. So back into the book here, this is on page 111 of that Paul Taylor book. This is, those of you that haven't watched that other part of the video, you need to go do that. This is Dutch Powder Painting by Paul Taylor. There are lots and lots of books, and I promise I'm going to show you some more books as well. But this stuck out to me, and you can see I read it at two different times, two different colors of the mark highlighter. But it says here, the requirements of decoration also affect the choice and positioning of the flowers. Large, magnificent, full flowers like roses, hollyhocks, viburnum, and poppies should be placed in the center of a festoon, or basically a bouquet. They called festoons bouquets. Middling flowers, those are flowers that, I have to use my specs. Those are flowers that show up in the after your center or your main, what they call the primary flowers, you would do secondary flowers around. And so that's what they call middling flowers. The job of the middling flower was to point the viewer in certain directions. I'll show you that in just a minute, okay? But so you had middling flowers like tulips, anemones, narcissus, carnations, mallows should be placed next to them, and smaller flowers, so on and so forth, further and further out. The entire goal of all of this was to create this, what they called a festoon of rounds, basically a hemisphere of rounds. So your bouquet should have a rounding feeling to it. And so you place certain flowers in certain positions, depending on the type of the flower, that are the most visually important ones go into the front. That's why I always say the rose. You always see me call the rose the queen of all the flowers. She is the queen. She basically has all of the interest, and that's why they usually will put a rose somewhere right around that center of that festoon. But it goes on. This book goes on in all different kinds of stuff, and there was. So one of the things I wanted to say is this, like right over here. Okay, the idea, just like I said here just a second ago, the idea of creating a hemisphere which gradually rounds by putting warmer colors in the front of the compositions, cool colors in the back, and so on and so forth. So it goes into color placement, okay? It goes into size and shape of those petals. All of that is going to be important. Okay, so what I started to do, and I studied this for over 20 years, and I traveled around the world to different, all different kinds of places, lecturing on what was meant and how to draw beautiful designs. And it is learnable. Okay, I know some of you say, oh, you can't do that. Or like the other day, I posted up a photo, and one of the ladies says, I watch all your videos, and every time I paint something, it turns out like crap. Okay. Don't ever say that. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Don't ever say that. Never insult yourself as an artist. Never do that. There are ways and pathways to learn everything. And if you don't have a pathway, if you don't have it, you just write me, give me a comment, do something like that, and I'll show you. There are pathways. I like people to learn. I like people to be successful flower painters. And if yours isn't turning out, you're doing something wrong. Let's figure out what is going on that's wrong, and let's correct it. And let's get back to flower painting. What you got to understand is these Dutch painters all did it. okay? And they were mass producers, and they produced very beautiful, beautiful compositions, and anybody can do it. But so, you know, here they talk also here about this here. In the middle of the first, a white rose. Behind that, Rosa provincialis. Behind this, a purple flower. Behind that, a peony. You know, he talks about all different types of compositions and how you will put these all together. And here's one of the things that, and I marked it here because I was giving a lecture one time on design, and I just marked this whole thing here. Paint all sorts of flowers on pieces of cardboard as roughly as you like, using just a single layer of paint. You want 5 or 6 of each color, as many as you can. And then what you do is you take all of these, what he's saying is, and you start to arrange them around until what you get is a pleasing composition with pieces of cardboard. You know, you don't just you just don't create this out of your mind. You're using, you know, visual aids to help you put stuff together, okay? And that's the rules. So, but when you look at this here where it says first a white, behind this Rosa provincialis, the purple flowers, behind that a peony, and so on and so on and so forth. All of these rules, and there's a lot of them, what flower you put what and where is in all different kinds of rules. And as far as the Dutch masters, I studied them all the way from Balthasar van der Aust in the early part of the 17th century through Van Heysen, Mignon, Abraham Mignon, and Van Elst. I liked Abraham Van Elst. I mean, I studied them all. I painted them all. I painted over 60 of them. I brought this one in, and I never really quite finished it, and I have to. I have one little flower, or 1 or 2 little flowers right here that I have to finish. These are in the third stage area of the painting. And I did this as an online class. And some of my students, you know, by the end, they were finishing it before I did. But I painted this painting here, and it uses the Flemish technique, a 7-layer technique of painting it. It was really a lot of fun. But this is the center flower here radiating out. This center flower radiates out in the different positions. And when you read in that book, you'll see those put in a white flower, purple flowers back behind that, red flower sits at a certain area. All that follows right around what the Dutch philosophy of flower placement inside of festoons or inside of bouquets. And it's all written down, and it's learnable. It is absolutely learnable. And that's what I did for so many years. And so I have a lot of online courses for it. Those of you that are here on YouTube, you can go back and learn a lot just if you watch the first couple of videos. I have a full free Dutch lesson on there, 28 hours of video, starting with grounding of the flower, how it's drawn, and it takes a look at Jan van Heysen's some of his early work. We recreated it, and I went down to the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., took very close-up study photos of that painting in the gallery down there, and cut it back and recreated it. And that's something I started to do, was recreate a lot of these masters. But it can be done. So this right here is a Van Elst painting, and I just absolutely loved his work and stuff. But I create a lot. But what I want to show you is this, a painting that I did just a couple years ago in 2021. And see, I used, you know, positioning of the purple, positioning of the white flower, the one radial white flower of its importance sitting out in the front. I use that same type of design, you know, turn it like this, and you have the difference between the white flower here and this secondary flower, peony there, and this one and that one there. And I started to learn how you turn and what I called rock and roll your flowers makes the viewer go in different directions throughout your painting. Does that make sense? It's all learnable, and there's techniques for all of that. And so after all these years, it's all up in here, and I know how to rock and roll my flowers in the primaries, in the secondary, or the middling area, and out into the third area to create a hemisphere of rounds, whether I'm painting Dutch or whether I'm painting, you know, any kind of design. But I had a lot of fun over the years doing a lot of, I brought in a couple of other studies back there to show you. And let me just reach over and show you. It's like this. Okay, so, you know, here's 2 more. This is This is a Van Hyasen study of fruit and, you know, and the different positionings of the fruit and what they do. An early Van Hyasen study. I did this one 12 years ago. I did this one. And this one I did 14 years ago. Here, this is a Mignon. And, you know, to really learn, this painting is, this is a recreation of an Abraham Mignon. And I really liked Abraham Mignon. Abraham Mignon was poisoned by actually the pigments that he used. He died at the age of 39. I felt that he was a student of Jan David Stahiem, who was is one of the greatest recognized Dutch masters. And Mignon was a student. He dies at 39 from poisoning of a pigment called orpiment, which was his favorite, one of his favorite pigments to use. But and it's made by boiling arsenic or heating up arsenic, so you can imagine it's very poisonous. So, but this particular painting, the original of Mignon, was destroyed during World War II in the bombing of Dresden, and all they had was a black and white photo of it. And so I recreated it many, many years ago into the colors, following Mignon technique after I had done over 20 Mignon paintings to really learn his particular style. And it's just absolutely fantastic. But all of this, guys, all of this is learnable. And it is teachable. And what a Dutch master did when they were learning is, like Mignon, he lived with Stahiem for 11 years as his apprentice till he started to learn how to put designs and colors together to get this hemisphere of rounds. The ultimate goal was to get this hemisphere of rounds. And then how colors react with each other to create visual impact and depth and so on and so forth. And so, like they say in the book here, you know, in this particular book, he says, you know, if you have a white flower here because of the nature of white, somewhere within the immediate circle of flowers immediately should be a purplish flower. Well, you know, you go look and yes, this is what Van Elst is doing. He's putting purple within the realm of that white to create that huge punch forward. Does that make sense? And so there are rules to this. And I painted a lot of Dutch online videos for it. But those of you that, you know, want to dive into a little bit more of it, we can. And I can, you know, I'll do a painting with you here in just a moment. We'll do a painting where we start to talk about flower shapes and directions. How do you, you know, this is, you know, not only do you have middling flowers, these right here are called middling flowers, but you have a middling flower design here. So when you look at this flower here, you see, you don't get a real sense of up and down with it. And I'll explain more of that in just a minute as I get some colors out, okay? But you have here to create this roundness to this bouquet that Van Elst is doing here. And how he positions his rose, and here, like here, he's positioning this rose out of this center of interest here, setting it off and leaving a space here and setting it off so the rose has its own visual importance. There's a lot of rules to that and why it happens. And I had to go dig through all of the books and Groschonenbroek to figure out why he was doing this, and it all makes sense. Now, it's all up here. Hopefully it stays up here through the years. But anyway, there's a lot of, and there's some other bigger ones that I did back there. You know, I have, like the size of that big Dutch Masters over there, I have about 40 of those types of paintings that I did. That's a early Van Hyasen. And that one that's right there is on our YouTube channel here for free. You can go find that one for free. And Van Hyasen was the master of the parrot tulips, of any of those types of tulips. And you can see on that back, right back there, you see how that let's figure this out. Okay, so that petal right there, how it bends back down. And see, Van Hyasen would take his petals and how he drew the petals of his tulips. That one bending back down, where does that take your eye? Right back to your center rose flower, which is right here. So the tulip takes your eye up like that. But by bending one of the petals down like that, he's taking your eye that way, right? Thank goodness I have a monitor right here I can see, because I could never point to it. But let me put these to the side. I'll bring out a board, a little bit of paint. We'll do a quick little floral about flower, size, and direction, and set a very simple Dutch technique about creating a pathway through your painting, okay? I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, everyone, welcome back. Let's do a little example of what we mean by setting up that middle flower and moving off of it. So I have a board here. This is a 12 by 18 board, and it doesn't make a difference. I'm just going to be using it to show you a concept today, okay? And so I maybe do a rose, maybe do some flowers. It doesn't make a difference, but the direction or the shape of a flower makes a difference. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's just do some quick little drawing here, and then I'll do a painting with you. So first off, a rose, let's just say I'm going to put a rose here. Now a rose basically is a circle. And if I open up the rose, or if I do a peony or something like I did there in the center, and I open up the center of the rose here, so I make the open rose. And you can go on to our channel there, and you can see examples of the open rose. Now, what does that do with your eye? That holds your eye in a rounding circle here. Does that make sense? And so this would fill the concept of creating in a Dutch painting what we consider the hemispheres of rounds, because they would do a composition and your eye would round all the way around. So that's a good rose to do there like that. But I created this theory of design many years ago, almost 30 years ago, and then went around teaching it, but used some of the Dutch concepts and then some of my observations that I found after painting, dozens of those paintings. And I created this theory called the line of design. And so I started to look at every flower has a potential for movement to it, to take your eye to movement. And so here the movement is round. But if I change this, let's just say I change this rose, okay? And now I'm going to do what I call extend the rose. So if I put a stem out through here, and then I move the center of the rose here and the bowl of the rose here, your eye now moves up. Does that make sense? And I've told you so many times in the rose videos, wherever I rotate that center, your eye will move that way, because that center is smaller petal interest. The Dutch say that is the area of the greatest contrast of color, and that is what's going to dictate where you go in your visual, what we call a visual journey. So I can move you, that particular way in the design. So we'll just soften this back up for a minute. I'll have to paint over all of this. So now let's look at that to a daisy. Okay, daisy has the same thing. If I come in here and let's just say I do a daisy or any kind of multi-petal flower, if I do it round, your eye holds round. Does that make sense? If I want to make a daisy that has movement to it, what I do is I'll apply the center, and then I put longer petals to the back side, shorter petals to the front side, and your eye moves now this way. That's a design, or what I call a line of design of a daisy that is growing a particular way. And so the Dutch did that. They would arrange flowers, and then you as the artist would manipulate those petals, just like Van Hyacinth does, in moving that one tulip petal down to take your eye a little bit different direction. We as artists can control the petals of our composition or what we're going to paint, and we can change its presentation by how we present those particular petals. Does that make sense? So what I do with a line of design, that if I have a board here that is basically a rectangle, and so this rectangle has a certain movement to it. Your eye travels up and down faster than your eye travels side to side. So that's where I normally will put in flowers that have a lifting motion of it, so that my flowers tend to make your eye go this way. If I have a board that's square, then I like to use a rounding flower. Okay, so that comes even from Van Elst. The board that he did his original on is almost square. So his festoon is pretty much square, inside a square. Van Hyacinth on his, since his board is now elongated, longer top to bottom, he has a middling flower, but the majority of his flowers go up and down, grow up and down. And then to help enhance that up and down motion, and give a lot more of the rectangle shape to it, he moved that one rose down to the lower right corner, which your eye jumps down, actually physically jumps down there a little bit and sees that rose, and that rose moving you out of the composition a bit. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but one of the things that I want you to understand, and I've told you in some of the other videos that we've done here, and maybe you haven't quite heard it yet, because sometimes you have to watch things quite a few times before you hear it. Maybe you haven't heard it yet, that all elements, all flowers and stuff, we're going to have a line of design, a movement to how you paint the petals. So will leaves, whether you do a more of a short oval or a long skinny oval that you'll find with peonies and stuff like that. Every flower, everything's going to have that. So let's paint some flowers, and some simple flowers I've done with you 100 times, and put some movement to it. And as we add the secondary or middling flowers, let's paint a central flower here. Then as we add the other flowers, we're going to be painting all of this with an idea of design. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's talk about it. So first off, what I'll do is I'll cover up some of this. I'll take my big brush. Let's take some green, some burnt sienna, some of my favorite colors here, and we'll kind of wipe out some of this here, okay? And I'll just take some of this out here, and let's soften some of this out too. We'll do it a little softer today, presentation. So let's add a little white, a little yellow maybe to this, and we'll soften some of these colors out here like this into this background. So my colors are there, but they're not quite, see, that just softens out the presentation of the painting here. So, and we'll just let's put a bit more of that back in here. But see, that little bit of white gives you a softer impression as you're working. And I'm just using water because I'm working real fast with a big brush. So I'll just soften some of this out here like that, okay? Now, and you could put other things in there. Maybe we want to have a little bit of pink today into a flower. So sometimes if I'm doing something soft, I'll go ahead and add that softly into the painting to begin with, right back up in here. So I'm going to apply a Dutch theory, a theory from the 17th century to a contemporary painting today, and follow what I call the line of design, okay? And we'll see how that goes. So I'll push some of this color, like I told you, in other little marks. Okay, so I'm going to move that around, right? Doesn't that look fantastic? You want to buy it now, right? Sometimes I do like my backgrounds, so I like them. I'm going to rinse that color out of my brush, and let's go set up the flower. Now, we have a board here that has a lifting design. If I was painting square, I maybe would paint an open rose, and you'll see those on my channels where I say painting an open rose, and look at the boards that they're on, more square and stuff. But we're going to paint one right up in here. We're going to put this one right up in here. We'll put on a rose, and then we'll talk about middling flowers and shape our middling flowers. Okay, so very similar to what we did this last time, when I talked to you about the color, that yellow rose and the vine. We'll do something kind of similar, but this time instead of talking about the colors per se, we'll do a little bit of that, but we'll talk about the design, okay? So here I have this powerful movement, and I've already kind of screwed that up in that I like that St. Andrew's cross, and now, so this rose and this powerful line, see that? That right there, I want to put that rose there, and that powerful line is going to bother that right there. So I either have to, be a little careful that I'm going to have to put something out here or down here that's going to pull the cross, because that pink lines up with that lines up the rose. It's not that you can't do it. I just see it right now and went, whoops. And so I'm not going to change it. I'm going to show you how I'm going to get past it. Remember last time I told you we do that St. Andrew's cross, right? And so I like to do that. Let's go into a little cool color, a little bit of the we'll paint more of a pinkish rose here today, maybe. Pull those colors. So my stem I would see down through here. So here would come the center of my rose. I want to keep this center up a little high, which gives this rose movement up. See, so there's the center. Here comes the base or the bottom of the bowl. That's where the bottom of the bowl is going to be. Maybe we increase the contrast just a bit more with some red violet right down there into the center there, okay? And so I can, let's rinse that out of the brush here for a second. It's red violet's a real powerful color. So let's grab a little yellow, a little warmth. Let's add a bit of that into this rose, just for color here. Okay, now, what I want to do is I want to start petaling my rose. I want the majority of everything to go this way, but I want a certain amount of petals that are going to come off to one side. Now, if you're painting like that middling or that rounding flower there, all petals going all the way around your flower are going to have the same distance out of their center. That keeps the flower round. But on a rose here that I'm turning, I'm going to change that. So let's put a little softer red, just a nice red, maybe a Naphthol Red Light, my favorite kind of pinky color, Naphthol Red Light and a little Quinacridone here. We'll paint this pink into here, and I'll put some heavy-duty color right here, but my petals here will be short. And you won't really see, these are what we call bowl petals right in here, and then further out is what I call the reaching petals, the petals that come from underneath the bowl, and those are going to come out here. And I control that. See, now watch what happens here, okay? If I petal this rose and I pull across this way, which you see me do so many times in other roses, I've short stroked the rose, and this petal, this has got a lot of movement up. Does that make sense? And following Van Hyacinth, if I start to bring out these petals here, elongate them out, coming out a little further, what I do is I start to reduce the amount of power that rose, and see how it's almost starting to round up. Does that make sense here? And so that's something that I watch every time I'm painting a rose. Do I want those reaching petals on the bottom here to pull back, which is going to take your eye back down like Van Hyacinth, like that tulip? I mean, I learned that 30 years ago. It's stuck in my head, and I paint it today in everything I do, okay? And so I look to see, do I want that? Or, which is kind of, the rose will still have power going this way, especially if I come in and I draw a stem. The second that I put this stem out here like this rose is going to have even more power to grow up and out. Does that make sense? We'll add a few stem lines here, loosen this up a bit, okay? So it's going to have more power to grow up and out. That I determine. I am in control of how quickly you go up or how quickly you're going to round up here. I'm going to take a little bit more of my shadowy, maybe a cooler violet, right up in here, and I'm going to intensify the shadow here. And I know color does it as well. So color is going to anchor my rose. So I'll intensify or actually bring in more color on the shadow side of my rose here, because I want to anchor this shadow side even a little bit more. So I'm going to bring in some more reds on this side, and then I'll do light colors. Now, coloring is another whole philosophy of the Dutch, and we'll talk some about that as well. But now I'll come back into my pinks and some white. Let's set that nice, beautiful light right up in here into the front of the rose, right up there. And that pulls your eye. Boom! Okay? And then I'll take a softer little pink, a little half-tone, a little halfway down, and come here to help round that bowl. I don't think I'll do too many petals on here. I'll keep this rose kind of soft. Doesn't need it. Maybe one more little layer, some white. You can see I put white on the edge. I'll lean over to that edge and kind of draw that rose like you saw me do in the 30 Days of Roses. Draw that little petal there. okay? I'm going to brush some of this pink out a little further. Then I'll take this warmer pink here, then some white on the edge. Now, how far, you see, if I come in here and if I do this, my rose does not reach very far. It almost rounds up. See how it's rounding up? I mean, it's going this way, but is the shape that's out here is rounding it up. So if I took that shape, the closer I start to take out this shape, the more that rose reaches. Does that make sense? And let me just show you here, because then I'll change it. But so if I know, and I'm watching this, I watch this, okay? I am in my mind. A lot of people will say, oh, you're so creative what you do. No, what I do, guys, is I follow formulas that I read for 30 years, okay? I know this, that if I sit here and if I take my burnt sienna and my green, and if I come in here and if I anchor a shadow color right here, I stop your eye from going down, and I'm forcing your eye to go up. And, you know, that's some of the stuff I like to do. Sometimes I'll pull you back down by pulling your eye this way, which causes your eye to come back down. But the rose has a lot of movement going that way. Does that make sense? So, but I also know that as a rose painter, if I take my white and if I take my petals, and if I increase a petal coming out this way, and I'll just paint right through that little green so I get a different color to my rose here, which will be pretty. It all works. And I'll put a little bit out here, which will elongate that side just a bit. The importance of these petals that are down here are causing your eye to pull back down like Van Hyacinth's petal. And I'm still giving you this movement this way, but I'm rounding your eye out. And the more white, or the more importance, let's go with a slightly lighter little petal right here. The more importance I put right out here onto these petals here, the next layer, the more your eye starts to pull back the other way and starts to round up. Each time I put a petal on here and I put that light color in here, what I'm doing is I'm softening your eye from traveling further up that way, and it starts to come back. And if I put a little bit more of an edge right here, boom, right in here like that, I give more importance to that petal, and I'm pulling your eye back down this way as well. I used to call it so many years ago, I used to call it the push and pull of a rose. You know, you're pushing and pulling these petals. Where are you taking the viewer? And how fast are you going to take them through that composition? There's rules. I'm just following rules. I'm not creating anything out of my mind. I'm just deciding how I want to paint this rose. So I'll come up here. Let's put another little side petal. If I wanted you to go more sideways, I would increase the edge and the color and the contrast of that one, and your eye would go a little bit more sideways. Let's drop this down in value here, make a softer little pink, and bring some of this little pink out this way, and just soften that out a bit here. And let's just leave it soft, you know. And by leaving this soft, your eye is going up and like that. It's exploding up and out like that. Does that make sense? Here. And then I can take you, like I've showed you before in other lessons, here painting, I can take, you know, like a negative color right in here, and I can increase the contrast or the painting of the interest in that particular petal on the rose right in there and pull your eye back out this way. So, or maybe I want to put a little bit right out in here and pull your eye that way. Wherever I put this contrast, it's going to pull your eye, if that makes sense. Okay. Maybe I want just a, if I go in here, watch what happens. Okay. Watch, nothing up my sleeve. Okay. I'm going to make your eye go back up just a little bit more, maybe just a little bit, by increasing another petal or two right in here, pushing your eye back up towards the top up this way. Does that make sense? Why? Because I'm adding more visual interest up here. I don't want to get too much, but I add a little bit more visual interest, and your eye will go up there. Now let's just soften that into the rest of this. We'll just take a little a little bit of quinacridone and soften some of that out. Maybe a nice, let's get a little more contemporary and put a little boom red right in there, and a little quinacridone boom red right into that as well. And just let that sit over there like that. It's kind of pretty. Maybe a touch of that little red right over here. These are all things that I like to play around with my color placements and stuff, and try different things. So that looks pretty good. So you have that. Now, and yeah, I'm going to put some other flowers in here around with that red. Now, if you're lost as to what colors you could use, you could go over there and you could read in there. If they have red in the first position, they'll put yellow in a second position, so on and so forth. There's all different kinds of rules that you could use. And you can see some of that if you just look at some of the ideas of the Dutch. With next to this pink flower, what other kind of flowers do they put there? We got an overall kind of a warm composition here. Before I go diving into that, let's add a little bit more contrast here to the low side. So my painting is pulling you up. I also want to give you a little bit of pulling down. So I can do that first by creating. I can do that just by creating some interest. I can do that just by physically pulling some colors down like this, which you see me do all the time, which gives you that pulling down, that feeling of dropping the composition down here. And you see me do this all the time here. I like to do that, right? I could increase. I could decide, since I did that, I could maybe have just a touch of this back out here, maybe a little bit, and add a bit of interest back up here to this side. There's a lot of power still in that stroke, so there's a lot of power in that line. And so I do want to give some power here across this way, because I've got the line here and I want to create St. Andrew's Cross. So this is where you see me all the time, all the time. And I do this with all of you. Now you know a little bit more why I do some of the things. But maybe sometimes you'll see me, I'll put another rose here, okay? And see what that does is that helps, see what that's doing is you have the main line here. Now as I paint this one, or if I put any kind of light or anything out here on this one, and I start to paint a rose or something out there, then I'm starting to pull you down. And the more that I define a center here, see what happens. The more I design that center pulling down, the more your eye pulls down. Does that make sense? So if I add a little bit of my dark right up in here, and really, I can really pull your eye down, pulling down this way. So now I got your eye going this way and pulling down this way, right? Bunch of different ways to do it. Or I could come in here and paint a daisy, longer petals on this side, shorter petals on this side, so it has a pulling power to go down. And I'll do that from time to time, or put in any kind of 5-petal flower or something like that, from time to time, put it in there, okay? And those are flowers of movement. So, I can just set something in, and sometimes I'll just do something like this, just very soft, and put that, that in soft. There's 1,000 ways to do it, and you've seen me do compositions like this all the time. But there's a reason why I do certain things, certain compositions and stuff, and how I set something up. So I'm just going to do a very simple little one. Maybe I want a touch of that warmer, more powerful red right in there into this rose. Let's put a bit of it right down in there. Okay. And now, so I have this rose. Let's darken that center. So now you're seeing roses a little different. Why we do that, why I draw them in certain positions and do things with them. A little bit of our bowl right there. Now, can I lift you back up? Yeah. I can pull you down by doing more petals down here. Okay? So if I come down here, I can continue your visual journey down if I come in here like this and I start to paint petals down. Now I'm pulling you down. Does that make sense? Here, you see that visually pulling you down. But I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to blur out that for just right now. And that's all I got to do. Sometimes I'll put it on. If I don't like it, I'll just blur it off a little bit. Just take it off. I'm going to pull you back up to the queen here. So I'm going to push one right in here that is going to lift your eye back up towards my center of interest rose. Now your eye comes back up. Magic, right? But it's not. It's just following design concepts and knowing what movement of your brush is going to do what. So I know I put that in there. Let's put a nice little rounding one here, you know, something like that. And let's just let them die off there on the bottom side. We'll increase the contrast here on this side. Does that make sense? So maybe we have a bit more over here, okay? Maybe a touch lighter right in here. Maybe a touch lighter right in here. Boom. And see it. Now, sometimes if I think that this pulls away from that other rose too much, okay, what's some other things you can do? Oh, you could, you know, the Dutch did all kinds of stuff, but I can take some of my background, which right in there is burnt sienna and green, and I'll slide right through that right now. Take some of that out. Boom, with the burnt sienna and green. Look what happens. All of a sudden, the power is there. A little bit of the lifting is there, but not as much, right? And then I'll just come back here with a little bit of my red, a little bit of the white, and this time let's be a little softer, not taking out all that burnt sienna and green, but let's give a little petal detail to it. And so it sits up a little softer, a little bit more transparent. So I'm looking at this now saying, okay, is that enough? Or do I need maybe just a touch more of an edge right here? Or do I want to take this and create one more? Do I want to blur this up? Push out a bit, blur that just a bit, give myself room for one more little layer of petals right in there on that bowl of that rose and increase its interest one more little bit. But I have to always watch it up against my queen to make sure that I don't paint it too much. And that's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm looking at right now. Maybe a touch of the light. As I increase more light out here on this bowl, I start to pull your eye further down. So I want to be careful there. I don't want to pull you too far down. Maybe just a little bit of that movement back there into that rose. Close that center down just a touch. Sometimes a center that's open too much can be a little distracting. So look at that. But you have all kinds of ways to do it. Let's just take a little bit of this transparent and just kind of blur up the edges here. You know, maybe a touch of this light, just casually, just give a little bit to that rose without giving it too much. Does that make sense? But I could travel that red right down to here, possibly, and keeping it up along that dark, because I do like that little bit of red there. So let's try this. And this is what you do, guys. You try. Let's push this red in right into here. That's coming in on this side of the rose here. I kind of like that. Maybe not quite as dark, light dark contrast as that. And then let's just set that into position here with this petal coming back in again. Boom, like that. And maybe just a touch of a petal here, maybe a little one coming in like that, just the idea. And now you have a different shaped rose there coming in. Which is correct? They're all correct. There's 100 ways to do it, and that's what I do with my painting is I'll paint the roses 100 different ways. You know, do you want to elongate this in the back a little bit more? You know, and maybe after I do all that, maybe I'll just come back in here and intensify that light pink right in there a bit more. Just boom, just right in there. Sometimes I'll leave streaks in the color that adds more visual interest to it, you know, that's all up to you, but I'm just bringing up the importance of this rose just a bit more by touching the lights one more time through. And that just brings in its importance one more time. And let's go a little softer pink right in here. There we go, just like that. So that's kind of a pretty rose. Now this could also be, doesn't have to be a rose, you know, maybe I'll increase this. You know me, I like to try and play. Let's just increase this. Now that I did that, I could increase this just a bit more to grab some additional interest to that rose here. But that's our queen. We got to be careful. She gets angry if we paint the others prettier than her, so we'll be a little careful. But then as I go out further, I mean, I can make little daisies, other little blossoms, other little flowers. I can make a beautiful gray here, little blue, burnt sienna. I love that, a little bit of green. Make some soft grays, a little bit of our pinks into that. Make some pretty soft grays and start some pretty white, like little blossom flowers. And you see, if I put one with the longer petals pointing up, I'm taking you up that direction. Does that make sense? Here, and maybe just some ideas of some other ones here. Sometimes I'll do this. I'll just come in and paint an idea first, and then I'll go back and evaluate it. So first we'll come out and let's maybe just see what some of this looks like coming back down this way. I want to vertical my design, so because that's the feeling of the board, is this vertical. So I want to have some vertical looks to the design. Some other whites and stuff out here. Doesn't have to be perfect, just get that color out there. Get some of those hits. I don't have to paint flowers out there. As the second that I start touching something, you're going to start seeing it as flowers. And I want just some little touches there. But let's soften that out a bit. Let's put a little, how do you soften it? Anything that's related to the background. So we'll just bring some of our other color that's related to the background through those and start to soften them. I kind of like their positions and stuff, and we'll paint them a bit more, but we'll add a little bit more to them. I want yellowish kind of into the center, because that's just a beautiful warm little center. So I'll just touch some of that around. Centers also. If you do them oval this way, they will pull your eyesight aside. They do it this way, they will go. If you do them round, your eye will hold. It's a holding pattern of it. Okay, so we'll do that. So I've got green, and let's put a little bit of dark right in there. There goes my phone. Sorry about that, forgot to turn it off. So we'll push some in there. We'll push some dark, some contrast in there. I'll probably put a little bit of maybe a leaf or something up over that. And let's take some warmer yellows and just whisper some of that into these these whites here. Just do them. Just put in some color. Maybe, and you know what? This quinacridone is so pretty, especially quinacridone with the Diarylide in it. It's such a pretty color. And see, I just touch it into that. So it's setting some of those back. Now I'll come back into my softer whites and let's set those petals again. Couple of strokes in, setting the petals of these little blossoms here. What kind of blossoms are there? I have no idea. They're pretty blossoms. They're just pretty. Sometimes I look at these Dutch paintings and I have no idea what that flower is. But I mean, because they've turned it and painted it in such a way, I don't know what it is, but it sure is pretty. So we'll do that. Let's push just a little bit. We'll leave this like it's a back turned one maybe here. Okay, so we'll push some long petals. Maybe we'll turn it sideways there. Okay, which means it gets a little bit of burnt sienna and green out here for acrylics, right? And it looks like, you know, some of you are saying, man, you paint so fast, Dave, and you paint so great. Guess what you tell me all the time, and I love it. Okay, I really love it when you guys say that, because you're really good for my ego. But one of the things is that I learned a long time ago is I'll put it on there, and as I'm telling you, you see it, boom, there it is. And if I leave it alone, your eye, it's just what Monet said, your eye will be able to finish it. If I go in there and start painting on it too much, I will stiffen it up to what I think it looks like, but you lose your ability to see what you see. Does that make sense? We paint too much. So I try to paint fast, and I try to paint really loose and casual so that I don't destroy your creativity in looking at it, if that makes sense. Because that's what it is. That's what I'm trying to do. Let's just blur through some of that there. And we'll go back and restate just a bit of that right in there. So I've got some other little flowers in there. Let's give it a little bit of the darker center there. I love burnt sienna. Burnt sienna, sometimes a little bit of red violet in that. Oh, that's just so pretty to put down just a corner of my brush. Just tap some down here. Just a corner of your brush. Tap some of it around. Right? Boom. Sometimes I'll push it around to do what I call incorporate the color or blur it off just a bit. Let's soften that with a little bit more yellow here. And then I'll add a little Hansa Yellow and white onto the corner of my brush. Step back and just stipple it a little bit here. Just a little bit of it to give a soft center there without doing it too much, because see, that center starting to detract from that rose. So I got to be careful. Here I'll just do a simple, just dirty brush, and I'll do a little bit more dirty brush down here. Not too much on it, just simple. Let's put a little yellow, a little Hansa Yellow here. Here we go. And let's add a softer gray. This is open medium. And again, you know, like I always say, all my colors and everything that I list, or forgot to tell you guys that at the beginning, are down in the very bottom, the video description. So, and see, if I pull these sideways like this, see the turning motion that gives that little blossom? So I'm pulling your eye down, I'm pulling your eye down, I'm lifting your eye and lifting your eye here. So it's almost like I'm doing a middling flower, a middle flower here that has a little bit of energy going that way. And so that's how I do it here. So let's just put a little bit of energy right here coming back up towards us here. Just like that. That's kind of neat. And maybe I'll take a lighter yellow-green, a pretty lighter yellow-green, maybe just put some color right back behind here, behind those, so that you get the feeling that, yeah, there's leaves or something back behind there, without having to paint too much of the leaf. And sometimes I'll do this. I'll just go ahead and paint the leaf, or the color of that leaf. I'll suggest it. I'll push it back out of the petal there, like that. And then I'll take that green with that light color and just lightly suggest the petal sitting up on top of that. And you'll see a bit of the greenish color from the leaf through that petal, and it softens it down and gives it really a nice look. I like that look. Let's take a little green, a little burnt sienna, little extender. I want this slightly transparent. And let's just come over here and push some others. You know how I like that, you know, I talk to you. Watch some of the other videos, because, you know, so, you know, why I like the matte surface is because I do this. I put on something and then I wipe back off to remove some of it, but the memory, the matte surface grabs the memory of that color and hangs on to it. And I like that. That's why I use it. So I'll grab right into here, grab this. We'll put out a few little leaves, just a little bit of movement here, and then I'll lightly soften that out. just by pulling through, and that matte surface grabs it. And I can increase the contrast by doing a little negative painting, maybe a little negative with some burnt sienna in it. Right there. Just increase the contrast right there. Maybe a little bit of that right back down here. Pulling it down. Let's put on some longer stems here. Crossing through the ideas. Sometimes I'll come right down in here and put another set of leaves. Sometimes you'll see me put leaves pulling down, which will pull your eye down. Sometimes I'll lift your eye back up towards the composition with one or two little leaves like that, pulling through, just the ideas of them. So you can see that. Now, I can increase the contrast, increase some of the, increase some of this pulling down movement over here, add a little bit more interest over here, a few little lines. I know little lines pull your eyes in all different kinds of directions. There's 1,000 ways you can do some of this stuff, but each time maybe I want to increase the power of that line again, and I can do that right here by this way, by increasing the contrast of that line right there. Let's soften that edge just a bit, increasing the contrast of that line. So that's a heavy, powerful line in my design. Is it right? It depends if someone buys it. Okay, if no one buys it, then yeah, maybe not do that one again. But I like it. I think it's kind of fun. Maybe now it's very vertical, isn't it? But I mean, so here you look at this. See, here's the outer shape of my board, and my composition is very much finding that outer shape of that board. I mean, and if I was going to do even more contemporary today, which I do love to do, I might consider, and I can just try this and take it off if I don't like it. I'll take some of my red, let's add some open medium to this. Gives me lots of working time and a little bit of transparency. Maybe tone this with just a bit of green and get ready to wipe it back down. But I can pull down like this and pull some of that color down and let that rose just kind of bleed off that edge there. And see, I like to experiment with these types of looks, and a lot of people like them. Some don't. Some just think, oh, Dave, you just ruined it. And that's okay. Don't do it on yours, okay? Don't do it on yours. Everybody likes different things. And sometimes I get some people that come up and say, well, I don't like what you just did on that. So what? Okay? Your job as an artist is to explore different looks. And you're never going to make everybody happy. Not everyone is going to like your teachings and stuff. And even though I try my hardest, it always seems that there's a couple of people that dislike on your videos. It happens. It doesn't bother me at all. So I'm going to put a little bit of that red right out here. Just carry that mark out there like that. I kind of like that. Maybe a touch of it right back up in here. Just the marks. I like that. It's a fun little painting. Didn't take us very long to get that done. Excuse me. I've had a frog in my throat all week. So that you can see as my thought processes, not only my color there, but my thought processes in design. How long I make a petal, where I'm putting it on that rose, pulling your eye down, putting your eye up. Am I going to make it a middling flower? You're going to have a middling flower in the center of your composition that everything radiates out. So how you draw, how you paint your rose has a certain amount of movement. How you draw, how you paint a blossom and stuff has a certain amount of movement. How you paint even an iris, it could have the big stand-up, the talls and the falls, I like to call them. You could put more contrast in the uprights, and then on the falls you could put softer, and your eye would go more vertical, or your eye can move down. And you can do like Jan Van Hyacinth and bring more contrast to a tulip petal, or bend specifically a tulip petal down that brings your eye back down around the composition. There's a thousand ways to do that. So you're combining both your painting skills and your designing skills, but you're watching that flower for how that petal is making you move. Does that make sense? And I learned all of that years ago by just going through this books for so many years and then painting so many Dutch paintings and studying those particular techniques. And those of you that can't do it, I'm going to give you some shortcuts. We'll do some fun paintings like this. But this applies to everything. This applies to ocean waves. This applies to westerns. How you're going to paint that western. This applies to a portrait, where you put the interesting strokes, textures, and movements on a portrait. You know, how you fold the hair on your subject. All of that stuff. This applies to everything, okay? So, and anybody can do it. And that's what you got to do. And, you know, it really kind of bothered me the other day when somebody said that about their painting. I don't like you, and I have never done it to myself. There's some paintings that I've done that I've had to sell for an incredibly low price because they didn't work the way I wanted to, but I still like it. I've never insulted my work, and you should never insult your work. My mentor always told me 40 years ago when I started, he said, don't ever insult your work, because you put a mental block right here. And what that does is it says to yourself, I can't do it. And then you will never do it. That's the reality of it, guys. So I don't say that. I was just like, well, that's going to need some more study. And I smile, and I laugh, and I have fun, and I move on, and I keep going. And if I don't understand it, I start studying until I do understand it. Okay? There's always a way, guys. There's always a way. Stay positive about it, because painting is fun. And that's why we do it, right? Right. All right. So there's that. We'll go do, I think I have up a western next. So we'll look at that western and that horse. And I was watching, oh my God, I was watching Jason Rich paint this beautiful western yesterday afternoon. And I was just like, man, I got to do that. I want to do that again. So, and the way in which he used textures and edges was incredible. Different than what he's ever done before. And I just really like that. So we might try some of that fun stuff as well. Learning all different kinds of ways. Okay? All right. Don't forget to hit subscribe down there. Push that little bell if you want to get notified when I release videos, because I'm kind of releasing them all over the place right now. And those of you that are members, I'll put a photo of this up into the membership so you can see that. And if you have any kinds of questions or anything like that, hit the comments. I try to get to them. I haven't been able this month to get to them as many as I want, but I will try to get, go back and answer some of those questions and stuff that you have, okay? And so until the next one, enjoy that. Give it a try. Watch your petals. Watch how far they go out. Watch, the turning of them, and it applies to everything. Or paint them round and create that hemispheres of rounds, okay? All right. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.